The night before the great army moved, the sky did something strange. The stars did not twinkle. They burned. They burned like small fires pinned to a black cloth, and they stayed perfectly still as if the heavens themselves were holding their breath. The soldiers noticed it. They whispered to each other in their tents, pulling their cloaks tight even though the air was warm. But Alexander did not whisper. He stood outside his tent alone, with his hands at his sides and his eyes open wide, and he stared up at the burning sky like a man who had been waiting for a sign all his life, and had finally found one. He was 20 years old. His hair was the color of honey in the sun, and his eyes were two different shades, one gray like stone, one dark like deep water. His body was not the biggest in the army, but there was something in the way he stood that made men stop and look. He stood like he owned the ground beneath his feet. He stood like the ground was lucky to have him. His name was Alexander, son of Philip, king of Macedon, but that was not what he told himself when he lay awake at night. When he lay awake, he told himself he was the son of Zeus. His mother, Olympias, had told him this from the time he was very small. She had told him that a great serpent had come to her in the night, a serpent sent by the king of all gods, and that Alexander was the child of that visit. Whether it was true or not, Alexander believed it. He had believed it for so long that it had become part of him, like his bones, like his blood. He looked at the burning stars and he said quietly to no one, "I am coming." In the morning, the army moved. There were 40,000 of them. Foot soldiers and cavalry, engineers and archers, men who carried spears as tall as trees and men who moved silent and fast like shadows. They moved east, away from Macedonia, away from Greece, into the wide world that Alexander intended to make his own. His horse, Bucephalus, walked at the front of everything. Bucephalus was a black horse so large and so fierce that no one else could ride him. He had a white mark on his forehead shaped like a bull's head, and his eyes were wild and full of fire. He and Alexander had understood each other since the boy was 13 years old, when Alexander had been the only person brave enough, or perhaps mad enough, to turn the horse away from its own shadow and ride him without fear. They crossed rivers and passed through green valleys and climbed over hills where the wind was cold and sharp. The men grumbled sometimes, as soldiers do, about sore feet and bad food and long distances. But when Alexander rode past them, sitting straight and easy on the back of Bucephalus, the grumbling stopped. There was something about seeing him that made a man feel like the journey was worth it. Like wherever they were going, it would be magnificent when they got there. On the 4th day of the march, they came to a river that was not on any map. The scouts came back with their faces pale and their words strange. They said the river was wide, wider than anything they had seen, and the water was not blue or brown but a deep, dark silver, like the surface of a mirror. They said there was no bridge and no ford. They said the water made no sound, which was the strangest part of all because rivers always made sound. This one was silent, like a road made of metal, lying flat across their path. Alexander rode forward to see it himself. He came to the bank and stopped. The river stretched out before him, wide and silver and absolutely still. The trees on the far bank were dark, darker than trees should be, and above them the sky was a color that was difficult to name, not quite purple, not quite gray, but something in between, something that made the air feel heavy and old. There was no sound, not from the water, not from the birds, not from the wind. Nothing. Hephaestion came and stood beside him. Hephaestion was Alexander's closest friend, the one person in the world Alexander trusted completely. He was tall and dark-haired, with a calm face that did not show fear easily. But standing beside that silver river, even Hephaestion was quiet for a long moment. "This is not a natural river," Hephaestion said at last. "No," Alexander agreed. "The men are afraid." "The men are always afraid of something new," Alexander said. "That does not mean we turn back." He looked across the water. On the far bank, something moved between the dark trees. It was too far away to see clearly, but it was large, larger than a man, larger than a horse, and it moved slowly, heavily, like something that had existed for a very long time and had no reason to hurry. Alexander felt the skin on his arms rise. And then a voice came, not from the far bank, not from the trees. It came from everywhere and nowhere, from the air itself, from the silence, from the inside of Alexander's own chest, as if the sound were being born in the space behind his ribs. "Son of Zeus," the voice said. It was not a human voice. It was too large for that, too deep, too wide, like the sound of the sea hitting rock, like thunder that chose to form itself into words. The soldiers behind Alexander cried out. Several of them fell to their knees. Even Bucephalus went still, which the horse had never done for anything. Alexander did not kneel. He lifted his chin. "Who speaks?" he said. His voice was steady. He was proud of that. "One who watches," the voice said. "One who has watched since before your world had a name. You have walked far, young king. But the road you are on does not lead where you think it leads. It leads somewhere older, somewhere the gods themselves do not go without good reason." "Then it is exactly where I need to go," Alexander said. There was a long silence. Then something that might have been laughter, low and rolling, like distant thunder moving away. "Bold," the voice said. "Your father's blood shows itself." "Which father?" Alexander asked. Another silence. When the voice spoke again, it was quieter, almost gentle, the way a very old and very powerful thing might speak when it had decided to take a small interest. "Cross the river, son of Zeus. Cross it at dawn when the water will carry you. But understand this. What waits on the other side is not a land for men. It is a land for stories, and stories have rules that no army can break. You may take one companion, only one, and you must leave your sword behind." Alexander's hand went to the hilt of his sword. It was a reflex. He had carried a sword since he was a child. It was as natural to him as his own arm. "Leave my sword," he repeated. "The world you are entering does not answer to iron," the voice said. "It answers to something else." Then the voice was gone. The silence that followed was different from the silence before, emptier, lighter, like a room after someone very important had just left it. The soldiers did not speak. They stared at their king, waiting. Alexander sat on Bucephalus and looked at the silver river and thought. He thought about the prophecy the oracle at Delphi had given him. He thought about his mother's voice telling him, over and over, that he was not ordinary. He thought about the darkness between those trees on the far bank, and the slow, heavy thing moving through it. Then he turned to Hephaestion. "Get some sleep," he said. "You and I cross at dawn." Hephaestion looked at the river, looked at the dark trees, looked back at Alexander. "Just the two of us," he said. "Just the two of us," Alexander said. "And your sword." Alexander was quiet for a moment. Then he reached down and unclipped the sword from his belt. He held it out to one of his generals, a big man named Ptolemy, who took it with both hands and a face full of worry. "Keep it sharp," Alexander told him. "I will want it back." He turned Bucephalus away from the river and walked the horse back to camp. Behind him, the silver water lay perfectly still, and in the dark trees on the other side, the great slow thing moved again and was gone. The dawn came slowly, like it was unsure of itself. The sky in the east turned from black to a deep red, and then from red to orange, and then to a thin, pale gold that spread across the horizon like something being poured from a great height. The camp was quiet. The soldiers were asleep, or pretending to be. No one wanted to watch what was about to happen. Alexander was already at the river bank. He had not slept. He had sat beside the silver water all through the night, watching it, thinking. He had no sword at his hip, and the absence of it felt like a missing tooth. He kept reaching for it and finding nothing. Hephaestion arrived just as the first gold light touched the water, carrying nothing but a short knife at his belt and a leather bag over one shoulder. He handed Alexander a piece of bread, which Alexander ate without tasting it. "The men are unhappy," Hephaestion said. They will be more unhappy if I stop, Alexander said. Hephaestion nodded slowly. That was the thing about him. He did not always agree with Alexander, but he always understood him. How do we cross? He asked. There is no boat. Alexander looked at the water. In the early light it had changed color slightly. It was still silver, but now there were faint threads of gold running through it, moving gently, like veins in the skin of something alive. As he watched, he noticed that near the bank the current had shifted. There was a kind of path forming in the water, a shallow way, not quite visible but somehow felt, a place where the river said yes rather than no. We walk, Alexander said. He stepped in first. The water was cold but not painfully so. It came up to his knees, then to his thighs. Beneath his feet, the riverbed was solid, unexpectedly solid, like stone or packed earth, nothing like the soft, uncertain mud of a normal river crossing. Hephaestion followed close behind, his jaw tight, his eyes moving left and right across the surface of the water. The silver current ran around them but did not push them. It was as if the river was choosing to let them pass, the way a great animal might move aside for something it had decided to respect. They reached the other bank in a few minutes. When Alexander stepped out of the water onto the dark soil of the far side, he felt the change immediately. It was in the air, thicker somehow, heavier with something that was not quite smell and not quite sound but something between the two, something ancient and layered, like the smell of a library that has not been opened in 1,000 years. The trees here were enormous, not tall in the way mountain pines were tall. They were enormous in every direction, their trunks wider than houses, their roots rising out of the ground like sleeping giants, their canopy so thick overhead that the sky was barely visible. Hephaestion stepped up beside him and looked into the trees. I do not like this place, he said. You don't have to like it, Alexander said. Just stay close. They walked. The forest was not quiet in the way the river had been quiet. There were sounds here, low, deep sounds that seemed to come from under the ground, and higher sounds above, too irregular to be wind, too purposeful to be birds. The light between the trees was strange. It did not behave the way light usually did. It did not come from one direction. It seemed to come from the trees themselves, a faint, green-gold glow that sat inside the bark and the leaves and made everything look slightly unreal, like the world just before waking from a dream. After perhaps an hour of walking, they found the first sign. It was a stone, taller than a man, standing alone in a small clearing. It was covered in carvings, figures of men and gods and creatures that were neither, all twisted together in a story that moved around the stone in a spiral. Alexander walked around it slowly, studying the carvings. Near the base, he found a figure he recognized, a warrior with long hair and a spear, standing before a creature with many heads, Hercules, the hero who had walked this world before him. Below the Hercules figure, carved deeply into the stone, were words in Greek. He who enters the old world must first be judged. The judge does not ask about your victories. He asks about your fear. Alexander read the words twice. Then he straightened up. A judge, Hephaestion said from behind him. What kind of judge? The answer came not from Alexander, but from the trees. The ground shook. Not dramatically, not the wild shaking of an earthquake, but steadily, rhythmically, like the footsteps of something very heavy moving toward them with great patience. The green-gold light in the trees shifted and bent. Birds or things shaped like birds exploded upward from the canopy in a dark cloud and were gone. The sound of those footsteps grew. Then it stepped into the clearing. Alexander had read every book his teacher Aristotle had given him. He had read about the creatures of myth, the Hydra, the Nemean lion, the monsters that heroes had faced and killed and become famous for killing. He had always read those stories with a kind of cold logic, measuring the threat, imagining the strategy. He had believed that if such creatures existed, a sharp mind would find a way through them. But nothing in those books had prepared him for what he was looking at now. It was enormous, 6 times the height of a man, maybe more. Its body was roughly humanoid but wrong in the details, too wide, too thick, with arms that hung too long and a neck that was too short, so that its head sat almost directly on its massive shoulders. Its skin was the color of old iron, gray and slightly shining, and it was covered all over in what looked like scales, or perhaps overlapping plates of something that was not quite bone and not quite stone. Its face, and it had a face, which was somehow worse than if it had not, was broadly flat, with deep-set eyes that glowed a dim red, like coals on the last edge of dying. It moved slowly, with absolute confidence, the way things move when they have never been threatened. It stopped at the edge of the clearing and looked at them. Alexander did not run. He looked up at it. Beside him he could hear Hephaestion's breathing, controlled, careful, the breathing of a soldier doing his best. "You are the judge," Alexander said. He said it as a statement, not a question. The creature's red eyes moved to him and stayed there. When it spoke, the sound came from its chest, not its mouth, like it was using its whole body as an instrument. "I am Orthrax," it said, "older than your gods, watcher of the gate between the remembered and the forgotten. You have crossed the water without a sword. That shows either great wisdom or great foolishness. I have not yet decided which." "Perhaps it is both," Alexander said. Orthrax was still for a moment. Then the sound from its chest changed slightly, lower, slower. Perhaps that was the sound it made when something surprised it. "I will ask you one question," Orthrax said. "Answer truly, and I will let you pass. Answer falsely, and I will remember your lie for longer than your civilization will last." "Ask," Alexander said. The red eyes burned a little brighter. "What are you afraid of?" the creature said. "Not the fears you show the world, the real one, the one that lives in the dark part of your chest where no general and no soldier and no admiring crowd can see it." The clearing went very silent. Hephaestion turned to look at Alexander. He knew the answer, probably. He knew Alexander better than anyone, but he stayed quiet, letting Alexander speak for himself. Alexander stood in the green-gold light of the impossible forest, in a world that had no right to exist, in front of a creature older than memory, and he thought for a long moment. He thought about all the answers he could give that would sound noble. He thought about all the answers that would make him seem fearless and great. Then he gave the true one. "I am afraid," Alexander said quietly, "that when I reach the end of the world I will find that there is still more world beyond it, that no matter how far I go there will always be more, that I will never be done, that I will die with the journey still unfinished." Orthrax looked at him for a very long time. Then it moved. It stepped aside out of the path, its great iron-gray body shifting slowly until the way forward was open. Beyond it, deeper in the trees, the green-gold light was brighter, and Alexander could see the beginning of something, a path, a structure, a place. "Pass, son of Zeus," Orthrax said. "You are the first to answer with the truth in 400 years." Alexander walked forward into the light. Hephaestion followed, close at his shoulder. Neither of them looked back, but if they had, they would have seen Orthrax watching them go, its red eyes calm and unreadable, its massive body perfectly still. Watching as it had always watched, as it would always watch. The path through the trees was old, ancient. The soil beneath their feet was packed so hard it felt like stone, and the roots of the great trees arched over it in places like doorways, as if the forest itself had shaped them into a kind of corridor. Alexander and Hephaestion walked it for what felt like most of the morning, though in this strange place it was hard to know how much time was truly passing. The light did not move the way sunlight moved. It stayed that same diffused green-gold, warm and directionless, coming from the wood and the leaves and the air between them. They did not speak much. There was a quality to the silence of this forest that made speech feel unnecessary, not oppressive, not threatening, just full, the way a room feels full when it is occupied by someone very large and very calm. Both men had the sense of being inside something living, not trapped, not threatened, simply contained the way a stone is contained in the palm of a careful hand. After a while, the trees began to thin. They came through the last of the great trunks into a wide open space, and what they found there stopped them both in their tracks. It was a courtyard, or something shaped like one. The floor was white stone, not marble, something older than marble, slightly rough and faintly luminous, as if it had absorbed light for centuries and was now giving it back. Around the edges of the courtyard stood columns, and these columns were not the clean, precise columns of the temples back home. These were rougher, more alive-looking, twisted slightly as they rose, with carvings that seemed to shift when you looked at them from the corner of your eye. Between the columns, the forest pressed in close and dark, but the courtyard itself was bathed in a clear, direct light that had no obvious source. In the center of the courtyard was a pool of water. It was perfectly circular, perhaps 10 steps across, and the water in it was utterly transparent, so clear that the bottom was visible, a mosaic of colored stones arranged in the image of the night sky, every star in its place, the constellations exactly as they appeared overhead on a clear night. And sitting on the low wall that circled the pool, wearing a robe of plain white that looked almost like nothing at all, was an old man. He was the most ordinary-looking person Alexander had seen since crossing the river. He was small and thin, with a short white beard and careful eyes, and he was holding a cup of something, water, perhaps, in both hands, looking down into it thoughtfully. He did not look up as they entered. He let them come all the way to the edge of the pool and stand there before he raised his eyes. When he did, Alexander felt it, not physically, not a cold wind or a trembling of the ground. It was something internal, a recognition, the way you feel when you step into a room and realize it is the most important room you have ever been in. The old man's eyes were not the eyes of an old man. They were young and deep, and they looked at Alexander the way the ocean looks at a shore, with endless patience, with total knowledge of every movement, every grain of sand, every secret the land thinks it is keeping. "Sit," the old man said. Alexander sat on the wall of the pool. Hephaestion stayed standing, a few steps back, his hand resting near his knife. He was not a man who sat easily in strange places. "You are not what I expected," Alexander said. The old man smiled. It was a small smile, the kind that knows things. "What did you expect?" "Something larger," Alexander said honestly. "Something that looked more like power." "Power that needs to look like power is the weakest kind," the old man said. He turned the cup in his hands. "You have passed Orthrax. That is not a small thing. Most who come to the old world do not pass him. They run, or they lie, or they try to fight him, which is the most pointless of all the options." "Who are you?" Alexander asked, the question he had been holding since he sat down. The old man set the cup down on the wall beside him. He folded his hands in his lap with the comfortable ease of someone who had done this 10,000 times. "I have had many names," he said. "In your tradition you might call me Proteus, the old one, the shape changer. But I am not here today as a shape changer. I am here as a keeper of what was and what might still be." Proteus. Alexander knew the name. He had read about him. A god, or something like a god, who knew all things past and future, who changed his shape to avoid being caught, who would answer any question truthfully if you could hold him still long enough to ask it. "I am not going to run," Alexander said. "I know," Proteus said. "I have seen you before, young king, not in body, in reflection." He gestured at the pool. "This water shows what has been and what might be. I have watched you in it for some time." Alexander looked at the pool. In its perfect transparency, the mosaic of stars on the bottom seemed to pulse faintly, like a very slow heartbeat. "Then you know why I am here," Alexander said. "Tell me anyway," Proteus said. "It is important that you know why you are here." Alexander thought for a moment. Then he said, "I came because the voice at the river called me, but I did not come only because of that. I came because I have always known that the world of men was not all there was. I have always felt here," he pressed a fist to his chest, "that there was something more, something I was supposed to find, something I was supposed to do that no army and no conquered city and no gold throne could give me." Proteus looked at him for a long time. The soft non-light of the courtyard lay across them both. Somewhere in the forest, something moved and was quiet. "There is a thing in this world," Proteus said finally, "a thing that was old before the Titans were young. It is called the Aparen, which in your tongue means the boundless. It is not a weapon and it is not a treasure. It is a truth, the most complete truth in existence, the truth of what all things are made of and what they will return to and what lies on the other side of the returning." He paused. "It takes a form. A physical form, something the mortal mind can hold and receive, because the mortal mind cannot receive it formless. For this age of heroes and iron and burning cities, it has taken the form of a flame. A single flame, somewhere in the deep heart of this world, burning inside a temple that has no door." "A temple with no door," Hephaestion said from behind. It was the first time he had spoken in a long while. "No door for ordinary entry," Proteus said, without looking at Hephaestion. He kept his ancient young eyes on Alexander. "But you are not an ordinary entry." "What do I do with it?" Alexander said. "The flame, if I find it, what do I do with it?" "You don't do anything with it," Proteus said. "It does something with you. The Aparen does not give power. It gives understanding. It shows the person who finds it what all things truly are, the gods and the men and the beasts and the stones and the stars and the space between the stars. It shows the whole of everything all at once, without judgment and without comfort. Some who have sought it in the past were broken by it. Their minds could not hold what they were shown. But for the right person," he paused again, "for the right person, it is the most complete thing that exists." Alexander was quiet. He was thinking about what it would mean, to understand everything, to see the whole shape of all things. He had wanted to conquer the world for as long as he could remember, but was this what that wanting had really been? Not the flags and the armies and the bowing generals, but this, the knowledge at the center of it all. "Where is the temple?" he asked. Proteus reached into the folds of his plain white robe and brought out something small. A stone, smooth and dark, small enough to close a hand around. He held it out to Alexander, who leaned forward and took it. It was warm, warmer than it should have been, and when he closed his hand around it, he felt it, a kind of pull, faint as the current of a slow river, pointing somewhere ahead and deep. "The stone will lead you," Proteus said. "It will grow warmer as you approach and colder if you go wrong. There will be 3 more trials before you reach the temple. They will not be what you expect. They will not be about strength or strategy or speed." He looked at Alexander very directly. "They will be about who you are, the parts of yourself you have not looked at, the doors inside yourself that you have kept closed." Alexander closed his hand more tightly around the stone. "And if I fail one of the trials?" he asked. Proteus picked up his cup again. He looked into it the way he had looked into it when they first arrived, calmly, without hurry, as if there was nothing in the world that needed to be rushed. "Then you come back across the Silver River," he said, "and the world continues without the Aparen as it has always done. The flame burns alone in its doorless temple, and you go on being a very famous man who conquered a very large amount of land." He looked up once more. "But you already know that is not enough. You told Orthrax yourself." Alexander stood. He looked at the stone in his hand. He looked at the forest beyond the columns, deep and dark, and full of the breathing of things older than time. "Thank you," he said to Proteus. The old man nodded. By the time Alexander looked back from the columns, Proteus was gone. Only the cup remained on the wall of the pool, and the water in it was still. The stone led them deeper, away from the courtyard of Proteus, back into the great forest, following a direction that was not quite north and not quite east but somewhere between the two, a direction that did not exist on any map made by any human hand. Alexander held the stone in his fist as they walked, and he could feel its warmth like a small heart beating against his palm. Every time he stepped in the right direction, it grew slightly warmer. Every time he drifted off the path, it cooled, and he would adjust, and the warmth would come back. Hephaestion walked at his side, watching the trees. He had said very little since the courtyard, which was not entirely unlike him. Hephaestion was not a man of many words. He was a man of presence, the kind of person who filled a space without needing to speak in it, who communicated through the angle of his shoulders and the quality of his silence. Right now, his silence was careful and alert. He had his knife out, turning it slowly in one hand, not out of fear, but out of the habit of a soldier who knows that an idle hand in an unknown place is a dangerous hand. 3 trials, Hephaestion said, after they had been walking for some time. Yes, said Alexander. Any idea what kind? None, Alexander said. Proteus said they would not be about strength or strategy. Then what? Who I am, Alexander said. He said it simply, without drama, though the words sat heavier in the air than simple words usually did. Hephaestion was quiet for a moment. That should be interesting, he said. They walked until the trees changed. The great ancient trees gave way slowly, not all at once but gradually, the way one kind of weather gives way to another, without a clear line. The new trees were smaller, thinner, closer together. Their branches interlocked overhead so densely that walking through them was like walking through a tunnel of living wood. The green-gold light faded. The air became cooler and darker. Alexander had to hold the stone in front of him almost like a lamp, using its warmth rather than any light to navigate. Then the tunnel of trees opened, and they stepped out into the first trial. It was a battlefield. Not a battle in progress, the battle was over. Or it had been frozen, perhaps, in a single impossible moment. Thousands of soldiers stood and fell and ran and fought across a wide plain, but they did not move. They were still as statues, but they were not stone. They were flesh and blood and real cloth and real metal, simply stopped, suspended in the final instant of whatever moment this was. Spears were frozen mid-throw. Swords were mid-swing. Men's faces were frozen in expressions of fury or fear or pain, or something beyond all of those. Alexander walked slowly into the battlefield. He recognized some of the uniforms, Macedonian soldiers, his soldiers, and there in the middle of it, frozen like all the rest, was a man on horseback, young, straight-backed, honey-haired, holding a sword above his head. Alexander, a version of himself, frozen in a victory he had not yet had. He walked toward the frozen figure of himself and looked up at it. "This is what you want," said a voice. It came from the air like the voice at the river, but this one was different. Smoother, more beautiful, almost musical. Alexander looked around and saw, standing a short distance away, a figure he had not noticed before. It was a woman, or something in the shape of a woman, dressed in armor that was not the armor of any nation he knew, bright and elaborate, with a helmet pushed back on her head and long dark hair loose around her shoulders. She was looking at him with eyes the color of a winter sky, and she was smiling, and the smile was both kind and dangerous. "Victory," she said. "You have built your whole life around it, the crowds, the conquered lands, the name that will never be forgotten." She walked closer. "And this is what I can give you, right now. I can give you this complete, every battle won, every land yours, a name that lasts 10,000 years. Alexander looked at her. "And what do you ask in return?" "Only this," she said. She held out her hand, palm upward. On it sat a small clay figure, rough, badly made, the shape of a man, but clearly not worked by any skilled hand. "Crush this," she said. "Just this. It is a small thing, a weak thing, no one of importance." Alexander looked at the clay figure. It was warm-looking somehow despite being clay, alive-looking in spite of being lifeless. "Who is it?" he asked. "No one," the woman said. "A man in a village 3 days south of here, a farmer. He has no name, you know. He has never done anything significant, and he never will. His life is of no consequence to your story." She raised her eyes to his. But his life is a thread in the Aparen's web, and it stands between you and your victory. One small thread, crush it and the road opens. Alexander stood very still. He thought about what it would mean, the name that lasts 10,000 years. He already wanted that. He wanted it with a fierceness that sometimes frightened him. He had always told himself that the wanting was fine, that all great men wanted greatness, that the desire to be remembered was not a flaw but a fire that made you run faster and farther than other men. But this was a different question. He reached out slowly and took the clay figure from her palm. He held it in his fingers. It was small, fragile. He could feel in the lightest way something from it, not warmth exactly, but something, an aliveness, a weight that was too big for its size. He stood there for a long time. Then he set the clay figure down on the ground at his feet, very carefully. He straightened up and looked at the woman. "No," he said. Her smile did not change. "You would give up everything for one farmer." "I would not take a life I have not earned the right to take," Alexander said. "A king who crushes the harmless to feed his glory is not a king at all. He is a thief with an army." The woman looked at him for a long moment. Then the smile changed, became something less dangerous, more genuine. She lowered her hand. "Good," she said. And the battlefield and the frozen soldiers and the frozen version of himself, all of it dissolved. The plain was empty. Only the trees remained and the thin dark tunnel through them, and the warm stone still in Alexander's hand. "Was that Athena?" Hephaestion said from somewhere behind him. Alexander turned. Hephaestion had been watching from the edge of the clearing. His knife was back in its sheath. He was looking at the space where the woman had stood. "I think so," Alexander said. "She was testing you." "All of them are testing me," Alexander said. He looked at the stone. It was warm, warmer than before. "And we still have 2 more." The second trial came before the day was out. It took the form of a river, a smaller one than the silver river they had crossed at the beginning, running dark and fast through a rocky channel. On the other bank stood a child, a girl of perhaps 8 years, small and frightened, the water between her and them fast and deep and clearly too dangerous for her to cross. She reached her hands toward Alexander with an expression on her face that went straight past words into something more basic, the pure helpless need of something small that is afraid. "Cross to me," she called. "Please, I have been here so long." Alexander moved toward the water, but then he stopped, because he saw what was underneath. Below the surface of the dark water, visible in flashes when the current thinned, were things moving. Long and sinuous, many of them too many to count. Creatures he had no name for, coiling in the depths, watching the surface with eyes that glowed. They would be on him before he reached the middle. He knew it with absolute certainty. This was not a crossing he could make and survive. He stood at the bank and looked at the child. "I cannot cross to you," he said. "The water will kill me." The child cried, real tears or something that looked exactly like them. "Then I will always be here," she said. "I have been waiting so long." Hephaestion put a hand on Alexander's shoulder, a warning, or perhaps a steadying. Alexander studied the situation. He looked at the water, the creatures, the child, the bank. He looked at the trees. He looked at his own hands. He had no sword, no rope, nothing but the clothes he wore and the stone in his fist and the knife at Hephaestion's belt. He sat down on the bank, cross-legged, the way his old teacher Aristotle used to sit when he was thinking through a hard problem. He closed his eyes. He thought. After a very long time, he opened his eyes and looked at the child. "Tell me how you came here," he said. "Not how you ended up on that bank, how you came to this world at all. What brought you through the Silver River?" The child's face changed. It was subtle, a shift. A second of something passing behind the eyes that should not have been there in an 8-year-old girl. Something older, something that was deciding. Then she smiled, and the smile was not frightened at all. She stepped sideways off the bank she had been standing on, and she simply was no longer there. The river remained. The creatures in the depths slowly stilled, and from the surface of the water a light rose, warm and gold, and it resolved itself into words written on the air. He who chooses wisdom over impulse opens the second gate. The water went still. The creatures were gone, and across the now calm surface a path of flat, dry stones appeared, leading to the far bank. Alexander stood up, brushed the dirt from his legs and walked across. The third trial found them at the edge of the world. That was what it felt like, the end of something. The trees stopped all at once, as if they had been cut by a single straight line, and beyond them there was nothing. Not darkness, not sky, not earth. Just a vast open whiteness, like the inside of a cloud or the face of a page before any word has been written on it. The white space stretched out in every direction, left, right, forward and up, and standing in it was impossible to hold onto any sense of size or distance. It made a man feel very small. It made a man feel, suddenly and completely, that he was just a man. Alexander stood at the line where the last tree ended and the whiteness began. He held the stone, and its warmth was stronger than it had ever been, almost hot now, a steady pressing heat against his palm like a coal wrapped in cloth. They were close. The doorless temple was close. He could not see it, but he knew it the way you know something in your blood rather than in your eyes. "The third trial," Hephaestion said. He was looking into the white. His voice was even, controlled, but Alexander had known him long enough to hear the tightness underneath it. "Yes," Alexander said. "Do you know what it will be?" Alexander thought about the first trial, the temptation of everything he wanted, offered at a price he could not pay. He thought about the second trial, the trap of a feeling, the urge to act without thinking, and how sitting still and asking a question had been the answer. 2 trials that had tested his mercy and his wisdom. Proteus had said the trials would be about who he was, about the doors inside himself that he had kept closed. There was one more door. He knew which one it was. He had always known, the way you know the thing you do not want to think about, the shape of it familiar precisely because you have spent so much effort not looking at it directly. He stepped into the whiteness. Hephaestion followed. Inside the white space, the ground was solid but invisible. Every step landed on something firm, but there was nothing to see beneath their feet. The warmth of the stone pulled Alexander forward, and he followed it, and Hephaestion followed him, and the line of trees behind them faded and was gone, and there was only white. Then there was a voice, not from outside, from inside. From the inside of Alexander's chest, from the deep part of himself that was most private and most true. His own voice, but different, stripped of everything performative, everything practiced, everything a king uses when he speaks to the world. Just the core of it, just the real sound. "You are going to die," the voice said. "Not in this world, in your own. You are going to die young. You are going to die before your son is old enough to remember your face clearly. You are going to die in a bed, sick, your body failing you, all your soldiers and all your gold and all your conquered lands unable to do a single thing. Your empire will fall apart before your body is cold. Everything you built, all of it." Alexander kept walking. "Your name will last," the voice continued, "and your name is not enough. Names are words, they are sounds. You will not be there to hear them. You will be gone completely, fully, finally gone, and the world will turn and new men will come and they will use your name and not know you. Not really. Not the way you know yourself right now, walking through this white place, alive and thinking and afraid." Alexander kept walking. His hand was tight on the stone. "You are afraid," the voice said. "Right now, this moment, not of dying in battle that you could accept that would be right and fitting for a man like you. You are afraid of dying without finishing, of the great vast unfinished feeling, of the world always having more. You told Orthrax this, you told the truth, and now you must live inside it. You must keep walking toward the thing you are trying to reach and know that reaching it will not save you. You will still die. You will still leave. The Aperon will not change that." The warmth of the stone was almost burning now. "Then why go on?" the voice asked. "If you know how it ends, if you know the limit, If you know that the world is too large for one life, any life, even yours, why keep walking? Why not stop? Why not turn back across the silver river to your army and your sword and your comfortable, comprehensible, bounded world and live in it for as long as you have, and make your peace with the size of what a man can hold? Alexander stopped walking. Not because the voice had convinced him, not because he was about to turn back. He stopped because the question was real, and it deserved to be stood still for, to be given a moment of honest attention, to not be brushed past the way he had brushed past so many hard things in his life by moving faster and pushing harder. He stood in the white and he thought, really thought, not as a king, not as a general, not as the son of Philip or the son of Zeus or the student of Aristotle, just as a man standing in a strange place holding a warm stone, knowing the shape of his own life and choosing to look at it without flinching. Then he spoke, not to the voice was himself and he knew it. He spoke to himself, out loud in the white in the silence with Hephaestion a few steps behind him listening. Because the size of the journey is the point, he said, not the end of it, not what waits on the other side of the last wall, the going, the looking, the refusing to stop even when stopping would be easier. A man who turns back because the road is long has not lost the road. He has lost himself. I would rather die moving than live standing still. He looked down at the stone. It was burning hot now, almost painful. He looked up. Through the white something was resolving. Slowly, like a shape coming clear in fog, something was becoming visible ahead of him. It was tall, very tall, taller than the trees, taller than anything he had seen in this world, and it was made of a stone that was not quite stone, the same ancient luminous material as the floor of Proteus's courtyard. It had no door, no windows, no opening of any kind in its smooth, curved walls. It rose from the white ground like a thought given physical form, solid, complete, unarguable. The doorless temple. And inside it, not visible, not hearable, but felt, in the bone and the blood and the deep central place in the chest where real things are registered, a flame. Burning. Burning with something that was not heat and not light but that shared the properties of both, the way an idea shares properties with the thing it describes without being the thing itself. Alexander walked to the temple. He put his hand flat against its wall. The stone was warm, the same warmth as the guide stone in his fist, the same quality, as if they were two parts of one thing. He pressed his palm against it and closed his eyes. It opened for him. Not physically, no door appeared, no wall moved. But the boundary between himself and what was inside simply ceased to exist, the way the boundary between two bodies of water ceases to exist when they finally meet. He could not afterward describe what he saw. He tried in the years that followed to find the words to explain it to Hephaestion, to write it down, to hold it in language the way you hold water in cupped hands. But language was not built for it. The apeiron was everything and it was one thing. It was the stone under the river and the fire and the star, and the thought in the god's mind and the breath in the sleeping soldier's chest. It was the spider's web and the web's shadow. It was the word that all other words were trying to say. And for one moment, one perfect, burning, unbounded moment, Alexander held it, all of it, simultaneously and completely, with no fear and no glory and no name and no ambition, just the whole of everything looking back at itself through two different colored eyes. When he opened his eyes, he was standing in the forest on the right side of the silver river, and the sun was low and orange ahead of him. And the world was exactly the same size it had always been. Hephaestion stood beside him. His eyes were wet and he did not seem to know it. They walked back to the camp without speaking. Ptolemy was waiting at the edge of it, holding Alexander's sword. He held it out. Alexander took it and buckled it back on, and the weight of it was familiar and right and enough. He did not look like a man who had been changed. He looked, if anything, simpler than before, quieter. A man who had stopped trying to outrun the edge of things and had found instead that the center of things was right here. In the next step, the next breath, the next morning, the next long, impossible, beautiful road. The army moved at dawn. It always did.